Had to bring the cherry picker back to Mr. Trav over at Trav Builds because he had to get his rear end into his pickup truck. Well, now I got to get my rear end into the garage. Look at that, though. Look at this. Genuine Generation 1 steel. So I have the Saginaw on these wheel dollies. And thing I'm going to do is get the rear end on the wheel dollies and then bring that son of a gun over there. Not all of us have the luxury around here like Trav does, you know. Cherry pickers. Right, so I have the rear end in place. Tires are on. I put 4x4s as spacers. I'm not sure exactly how high, Method Man, Red Man, how high the rear end's actually going to be. I'm assuming it's probably going to need some more travel than that with hitting bumps and whatnot. The only part that sucks is it's literally like almost dead nuts even. I think it could come up just a smidgen on the back. No, actually. It is a little high in the back. I'm assuming I probably need a few more inches of travel. I don't know how much these are going to compress. These were on the back of a Model A pickup truck. Granted, they were shortened a little bit, but this guy, Tim, that I know, was literally jumping on the back of the frame. I mean, the frame was bare like this, but a Model A truck. He was bouncing, and they weren't, I mean, an inch of travel, maybe. Granted, I'll probably have a little bit more. I might not, though. I mean, Model A truck, yeah, the bed's light and everything. But, I mean, what's the pickup bed weigh? If you make them out of steel, it's probably going to weigh close to what the back portion of this coupe body does. Granted, I'll have a gas tank in the back here and probably a battery, unless I stuff the battery somewhere up front. But if that's ride height, just put this in perspective for you. If this isn't ride height, the bottom of the frame to the ground is about 10 1/4 inches, which I like that a lot, like a real lot. If I can get this to be ride height, where it drives down the road, the frame set up, maybe I'll have to notch the tubes a little bit back there for the axle to travel up, make some plates or something. Maybe, we'll see. We'll get to that road when we cross it. Let's get to that bridge when we cross it. But if the bottom of this frame is at 10 1/4 and I drop it down 3 inches, the bottom of the body will be 7 inches, which is roughly where I had it propped up before and loved it. I had it on 2 of those and a 2x4. Actually, just 2 of those, so 3 1/2, it's roughly 7 inches. This is a transmission cross member. Granted, you know, it's 4 1/2 inches. I don't have a 750-pound small block on here between the motor and tranny. I've heard the front end drops roughly like 3 inches over time. Do a little upside down. So we got there like 6 1/2 or so. Depending on where the oil pan's gonna be, we might be good. Also though, remember, these are small tires. So there's a very good chance that I might run 19-inch Model A wheels on it. Not sure yet. I definitely like the way the 19s look in the front. And maybe I'll run the 16s in the back with a really tall tire. I don't know yet. I kind of want to just get the car assembled with these wheels and tires on it to get it moving, get the motor and tranny in place, get the body pretty much sitting where it's going to be, and kind of see how much it settles down and how much clearance I have underneath the oil pan. The transmission I'm not really worried about. What I need to do now is figure out exactly how much room I have inside here on the inside of the body. That way I can run my radius rods to the frame and kind of start getting those mocked up and square that. I think I'm actually going to move the motor and the grill and everything and get this all the way flat against that wall. That way I can work on this in this area here underneath the lights and whatnot. That way I can weld it here as well. This portion of the garage is really flat compared to everything's pitched for that drain on this section over here. New day, nice and cold here in New England. Just had a few buddies over. Thanks guys for helping me lift the body back out of the back room and get it back in the garage. The plan for this is we're gonna build some sort of cart to have the body roll around in the garage. Preferably a little bit taller than the frame. That way I can actually like rotate the frame. and roll the body over and take it off and on myself. It's either that or this beam right here. What we're gonna do is get a block and tackle or like a, you know, like a chain or pull and get some sort of eye bolt up in there or bracket, and I'll turn it this way and use that to lift the body up and down when I need to do this by myself, just because it's very difficult to do, you know, line up a group of friends to have my buddies come over and help me lift this thing all the time. But I do need to get the body on the frame and see where I'm gonna have the rear end exactly line up. I think it's gonna be somewhere in that location, pretty darn close, which in theory should run the rear axle in this area here. We will see. I'm gonna take this out, as well as probably put some cross bracing in here. I think I'm gonna actually channel this car on the ground first and then cut the floor out, so I'll brace everything and do it that way. I wanna channel the car so it has a 6-inch channel total. That way from the bottom of the car to the top is a roughly 6-inch where the floor is. In theory, that will drop this 3 inches below the frame, give me a nice body ride height. The more and more I look at this car and people that build these, everybody chops them. Like, they're all chopped. And everybody rides like this with a little windshield. Don't get me wrong, I think it's absolutely incredible looking. I think it's awesome. I think it's classic hot rod, but nobody leaves it tall. Like, there's very little tall T's. So I'm thinking I might leave it tall for now. If I do chop it, it'll be down the road once the body and everything's mounted on the car. I guess I gotta make the decision before I put the cage in there and stuff and secure the car down and everything. But yeah, we'll get to that. Baby steps here, baby steps. Main priority now is to get the kind of roller built for this so I can get it up, and then I'm gonna have to get that on this frame to see where the rear end's gonna go. And then I have to measure inside from left to right to see what the distance is inside the body frames there. That way I can run my radius rods. You're supposed to have them more triangular so they kind of go out, just like the front is here. You can see they go out, just so everything rotates off the center point of the frame. We'll have to do a bunch of measuring. I don't really have much time tonight. So we'll get some measuring done. We'll get the brackets tack welded. They're pretty thick brackets that I have for these. Those are radius rods right there. These are pretty thick. They're probably a little too thick for what the old 140 Hobart can weld. So I'm gonna have to, you know, grind them down a little bit, put a taper on them, and really get some heat in there first, and have a friend of mine who I trust welding more than me, especially on this aspect of it, blast these things in solid. Or maybe I'll have him do it with his big boy welder, bring it to his house. We'll see, we'll see. T propped up on the blocks that I use to put under this thing to do the suspension over the winter. And it's just enough to get the frame up enough to slide it underneath the car. The only thing I'm running into is there's a cross member roughly where that part of the frame is underneath the car. So I'm gonna jack the back up, put these underneath the frame part here, and see where that goes. I think I have to take the trunk lid off. This hinge is busted. This one's still attached. I'm trying to get this off real quick so I can kind of see where that is at inside. I just want to see where the rear end is gonna lay on this frame when I drop it down. Took the trunk lid off. Nothing like trying to get out 100-year-old bolts, right? So this one got destroyed. One broke. This one's just spinning on the other end, so I'm gonna have to cut that off. This part of the hinge is, this one broke. This one's just spinning just like the other one. But the knob, the little nub that's on this one, popped out. That swivels on. So that's why anytime I'd open this side would always come out. Not a big deal. We'll get that fixed up. I actually might figure out a way to get it to close this way and put hinges down here so it opens up this way. That's a thought, but also might just keep it the way it is. We'll see. Also, to make room for the frame to come up, I just cut that back portion out right there. Not the best cut, just enough to get it out of the way temporarily. I'm gonna clean it up. My goal is to kind of have everything run nice and smooth with the actual frame part here, and then bring this up and then channel and weld everything to the body and get it mounted nice and smoothly around the whole inside here. I should probably get to the point to where I get some steel and start bracing, cross bracing, so this doesn't move. But at the same time, like, all this is not even connected. there, all the way there, so that the body is, it's where it's at. And it's a rat rod, so as long as the fucking trunk closes, and I can make the doors close somehow, we're gonna send it. Body is kind of on the frame, not fully. I just did it the way it is. 4x4s underneath those blocks to be able to roll the rear end under there to kind of see where the rear end's gonna sit. Granted, those tires aren't as big as I want them to be. For now, they'll work. Obviously, this is gonna get lowered down in there, so whoever had this before me kind of did some mocking up to see where the rear end was gonna be cut into the back wheel well. And whoever did it, it's like literally dead nuts. It's exactly where I want it on the frame here. So I made a mark here to where I want the axle to be centered in, and then I'll square that up with the frame. And now that I know where the axle is gonna sit as far as the side profile of the car, if I run a bigger wheel, they're gonna stick out more, be nice and lowered. I do have room. We might run into an issue, not sure. But these tires are also kind of wider than I wanted them to be. So we might need a spacer, we might not, but we're gonna get this set up to where it's gonna work. We're gonna make it work. If I gotta run a spacer, or I gotta get a skinnier tire temporarily, or do whatever I gotta do, it's gonna be awesome. Another night tonight, not a ton going on as far as working on the car. Just little things. So I got the 51 backed out a little bit because I had to get the frame from underneath out, move it over. I built a cart to roll the body around while I'm working on the frame. Just some 2x4 and some casters from Harbor Freight. The good old saw here. I kind of wish I took a time lapse of me building it, but it's literally a dolly. So if you can figure out what a dolly is, you know how I built it. But I just want to get this thing to where I can move it around on my own without having to call 4 of my friends. And now that it's on the ground, I can at least put 2x4s, jack the body up, and get it back on top of here and settle it down. But that'll be good because I can wheel this and get it, you know, this way. Boop, in there. We're getting ready to mock up the rear end. I have it kind of mocked out to where I know where it kind of has to go as far as to the body lines. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to center the rear end to that line there, give or take a couple centimeters, or 16th, I should say. We're gonna go old school because it's 16ths and 1/8 inch, whatever. As long as it's fucking close, I really don't care. And if it's one of those things where somebody looks at me and they're like, "Oh yeah, you know, it's a little," one of those, you know what I mean? Right. Oh, look at that, real close. Oh yeah, boom, right? Yeah, right. So we'll get it lined up here. Get the rear end squared in. Right here, the ground is pretty flat. I did put a quick level on it. So I'm probably going to get the radius rods set up here. I'm going to do about 1.5 inches past the frame and then angle them towards the frame. That way I have a little bit more of an angle to, like I said earlier in the video, get that center mark so it rotates just to help out. I mean, I'm not doing anything crazy with this car. We're just driving this thing. So regular driving, it's going to be fine. Same thing as we did as the front. We'll get the jack stand set up with some string, and we'll measure, just make sure that the rear end is square as best as we can in the ballpark. Because, as you know, these radius rods here, they have clevite, or clevis, whatever the hell those end marks are, and then it has Heim joints on this side. I had to think about that for a second. And those are adjustable to help me get the pinion angle as well as square the rear end with the car. The Heim joints that bolt down roughly, these are Heim joints here. These allow, you know, in and out, allow the rear end to move this way, or the front end this way, but it's the same thing essentially for the rear ends. They'll allow the rear end to move that way or that way to square it up with the frame, and that's what we're looking to do. I'm waiting to hear from a friend of mine who has a foam small block Chevy and turbo 400, which it's not ideal. I mean, I guess it's kind of ideal. It's a tranny with a tail shaft that's going to bolt up 90 degrees to the block. So turbo 400 will get me in the general area to where I want to put the rear pinion angle. I called Speedway. They said that this is anywhere from 4 to 6 degrees tapered down compared to the engine mounts. And if I run a angle finder on here, it actually hits 6 degrees exactly. So I'm assuming, and I'm just assuming here. But if the tail shaft and everything's square with that 6 degrees, the center line of the output shaft is going to be 6 degrees downward, which means if I run a parallel angle, I need to take this with the radius rods and run 6 degrees up. That way it runs up at 6 degrees from my fucking pinion, and then that runs down at 6 degrees, which would mean they're a parallel angle for the U-joints, which would not cause any stress. Now that is theoretically speaking. So I need to get that foam block and transmission from him. If he's tied up with it, because I know he's building a race car right now, then we're just going to have to throw the block and tranny in there and real quick, a little mock-up bolt, and then figure it out that way. But I want to make sure I don't have any vibrations, and then it's time to get the rear end welded and solid. So that's a little update. This is going to end up the video here. The next one is going to be me actually welding and setting the rear end in place. So thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. We'll see you again next time. See ya.